Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum students. How are you? I hope you are all fine. How was the last lecture? It was good. Did you revise that lecture? I hope you all have done that. So dear students, today we are going to start another very important lecture on, the title is there in front of you, effective use of teaching aids. I am sure this term is quite clear to you. Why? Because in the last two lectures we talked about lesson plans, right? So in those lesson plans, one element was teaching aids, right? So in every class, of course, whenever you will teach language to your students, you will need some teaching aids. So here our focus is on discussing how to use these teaching aids effectively, means effective use of teaching aids. Why we need it and how can we use these teaching aids, we will be talking about in this lecture, right? So let's see, as per routine, we have to review the previous lecture. In the last lecture we talked about, yes, making request, fine, and then replying to request. If you remember, our lesson plan was on teaching, requests, how can we make requests, and secondly, how can we reply to those requests appropriately. And you remember our aims were to practice what? To present, to practice, and to produce polite request and their replies, appropriate replies. And we also, our aim was to revise the use of simple past tense for narratives, right? So when you have to narrate something, how can we use past simple tense? I hope you remember that. And then we also saw that, you see, how to revise some, any, or one, fine. And then our exponent was, could you lend me, could you lend me, of course, a pen? And reply was, yes, certainly, of course. And if you have to reply negatively, you could say, I'm afraid I haven't got any, right? And then of course we saw that our assumed knowledge was the student had already been taught have got, right? And they had an idea about countable nouns and uncountable nouns, right? And then which adjective we need with these countable nouns, yes, we discussed in our last lecture. And aids were, we had a blackboard, you have realia, and we had a game for free production stage. The time was 55 minutes to 60 minutes. And procedure, you remember, we had a dialogue, fine, about the last weekend, right? Teacher asked the students about their last weekend and they replied, right? The question was, what did you do on your last weekend? Fine. So reply was, that question was in the past tense, and naturally reply was in the same tense, right? So this was, right, our activity that we did in our class. And the way we started the class, that was first we revise, and then teacher presented, right, polite request, fine, and also teacher presented replies to polite request, and teacher gave different versions of polite request. Student could say, surely, of course, right, your wish is my command. So in this way they reply. And then again what happened, that you see the next stage was the practice stage, where the student practiced using, students mingled out, and you see they had what? Objects, a list of objects, and they asked questions, fine, and there was a writing task as well, fine. So this way, in fact, we talked about in the last lecture. In short, our last lesson plan was about making requests and how to reply. And we saw how can we teach request and how can we teach our students reply. And I'm sure this review would help you, in fact, recap the things that we talked about in the last lecture. Right? So students, again I would say that the things we talked about in the last lecture, they were discussed to give you an idea, right, that how we can make our lesson plan. And here I want to tell you again that when you make your lesson plan, you need to know which level you are teaching, right? Who are your students? Fine. Is it elementary level, pre-elementary level, or it is intermediate level, or in fact, advanced level? And then which teaching aids you are using, and what are the aims? That is very important. And then what are the exponent? And then we move on to procedure. What would be the procedure? And in procedure we talked about stages, right? That is a warm-up stage where you prepare students, right? And how you warm up students, it depends, right? If you are a creative teacher, if you are an innovative teacher, if you keep on thinking, so you always think of an idea, because warm-up stage, in fact, is a stage which you see prepares the minds for the presentation stage, right? So if you do a very good warm-up stage, so your other stages would be fine. And if on the other hand, if you could not have an excellent warm-up stage, so then the other stages might suffer, right? You may not be able to present well because the minds are not ready, right? So here is the motivation level of the students, of the learners, is a must. So in the warm-up stage, what we do, that you see, we prepare our students for the teaching that is about to start, right? So therefore I personally feel, and I personally recommend that, you see, every good teacher focuses on the warm-up stage, right? Because in the warm-up stage you remove barriers, you make things easy, and you give the impression that it's going to be an ideal class, right? And of course you have to have such a warm-up stage that students forget about, of course, the complexities of that learning process, right? So a good warm-up stage, a good, well planned warm-up stage definitely saves 9. A stitch in time saves 9. So my dear students, focus on the warm-up stage. You have to have a good warm-up stage, and then you think of your presentation stage. Improve your presentation stage, how well you can present it. And at the end of the presentation stage, if you are a creative teacher, if you want to make it your career, if you want to improve presentation stage, then at the end think for a while, take a pause and see how well this could have been done. Similarly, the practice stage, after the practice stage, take a pause, right? See, in retrospect, and start thinking how well it could have been done. Similarly, you move on to the last stage, that is production stage. Dear students, so these are what the stages are there. The warm-up stage is one, the presentation stage, the practice stage, and the production stage. So these are the stages of the teaching. You can give assignments, even at the end you can give students the homework. So these stages are important, and we had a detailed discussion on these stages. We saw the purpose of these stages, we saw the role of teacher of these stages, and I spent much time on these stages, in fact, right? So again, I would say to go back to those lectures and listen those lectures, read about those stages, and if you work on these stages, if in fact strategies of these stages would be clear, I guarantee you, you will be a good teacher, you will be a good language teacher, right? So provided you work on these stages, provided you want to improve with every lesson, it's a good thing in teaching that you see you hold yourself accountable, right? After every lesson, if you write feedback, if you write comments, of course, because you being teacher, you are conscious enough, so and everybody wants to improve, right? And this improvement, of course, it goes on, it never stops, right? So we try for it. That's why the one tip is that after that teaching, after that lesson, you need to ask yourself some questions and get the answers. And I'm sure if you do it on a regular basis, after this, I mean, you see, you will keep on improving, right? And you will achieve excellence if you do it. So let's come to today's lecture. It was a detailed one on the previous lecture. Why? Because these stages are very important. Today, yes, teaching aids, right? Very important. Why? Because, you know, the teaching aids, again, why we use teaching aids? Why? Because these are these things which aid you, in fact. They help your teaching, elevate your teaching, in fact. Without these aids, of course, teaching might be in the air, right? Teaching might not serve the purpose. I hope you understand, right? So therefore, teaching aids make teaching effective. Teaching aids help teacher, in fact, do his job well. Teaching aids help learner learn the language well, right? So therefore, these teaching aids, they have dual purposes. Fine. Not only these aids help the teacher, but also they help the learner, right? And of course, the teaching aids, in fact, support this teaching learning process, right? So if these aids help this teaching learning process, so things would be fine. And again, for example, Blackboard, one of the oldest technology, you call it. Why I call it technology? Because all the current technologies that you have now, if you think honestly, so all these technologies, somehow they are derived from that Blackboard. Fine. And now you might have Whiteboard. But again, if you go back, there used to be a Blackboard where we used to use chalks, right? And now from that Blackboard to Whiteboard, in fact, and nowadays you might be familiar with Smartboard, right? A computer, a fixed board, right? So of course changes are there, right? With technology we are moving, but we cannot ignore this board, right? We cannot ignore this board. And of course it was the easiest and the cheapest technology. Even in some schools I saw there are no, I mean, proper these boards. Even what the teachers have done on their walls, they have painted them the black paint, of course. So on that paint they can write. So a wall, a part of a wall can serve as a blackboard, right? So this is what we do. I listened to a researcher yesterday in a conference, in an international conference on, of course, higher education. So a speaker from UK was saying that was the Blackboard. This is the oldest technology. And the researcher, of course, the name was S. Dunn. She was of the view that, you see, the Blackboard, whatever technology that we have now, it is the output of that, the Blackboard. So dear students, we cannot deny the importance of this Blackboard. So the question is, why use teaching aids? Why use teaching aids in fact. So dear students, teaching instructional aids are useful to reinforce what you are saying and summarize key concepts. Is that, I mean, I told you this sport, they reinforce them, right? So there is a reinforcement on what you are saying and summarize the key points, right? Teaching aids, of course, they help you, they support you. It's a reinforcement, fine? So we use teaching aids because these aids reinforce. Also, these aids ensure that your point is understood, fine? That if you see that the purpose of teaching aids, these aids ensure that the point is taken by the students or they have understood, and signal what is important, essential. Why? Because when you use the whiteboard or the blackboard or the OHP transparency or the slide that you have, so that shows that it's an important point. I hope you understand, right? So this is what, my dear students, you see, of course, when you use teaching aids and you write something on the board, so obviously it tells the learners that this is an important point, and what learners do, most of the cases, they take that point down, right? So again, a point which is given by the resource person, given by the teacher, and the learners take that point down. So when the teacher writes, obviously it is professional development on the teacher's part, right? When the learners take that point, so of course learners improve, fine? And here I might have told you in the last semester, when you take notes, so ideas float from your hands to your mind. And when you write, in fact, just you copy by seeing something from the board, chances are there that you retain more, and in future you can use that, right? So of course, when the learners write something, they take notes, and even the teacher writes, of course he has to think. So thinking process is there, teacher has to think and then he has to write. So maybe teacher, of course, is working on. So it's teacher develops, then he writes, and the students, of course, they write and they develop. So these teaching aids, in fact, enable students to visualize, experience something that is impractical to see or do in real life. Something is on the board, for example, if a teacher draws a circle, a mathematical teacher draws a circle, right? Or an English teacher, for example, draws a picture on the board, right? Or he shows a picture to the students. I hope you understand. So of course this helps the students to visualize. Cat, for example, if you talk about cats for hours, but if you just draw cat on the board or you show a picture of cat to the students, language students, so things would be easy, right? And then these teaching aids engage or stimulate students' other senses in the learning process, facilitate different learning styles. Of course, what is the learning style? Some students learn by seeing, some students learn more by doing, right? Some students learn by writing. So of course, when we use teaching aids, so these teaching aids facilitate. So there is what? Facilitation. These teaching aids facilitate, in fact. So that's what, of course, mean we use. Why use teaching aids? So these are some points that say that why teaching aids are important. All right. Now, of course, as far as teaching aids are concerned, instructional teaching aids must be. The point is that why use teaching aids we talked about. So when you use teaching aids, what should they have? So these teaching aids must be well prepared. It's important, right? I mean, that's why if you write on a board and you have a plan to write on the board, you need to know what to write on the board. I have seen some teachers, new teachers, they even forget or they have fear to write on the board. Some teachers struggle while writing on the board. This shows that the teacher has not come prepared. A prepared teacher, whenever he writes on the board, so he has done a homework. Fine? A prepared teacher, of course, always comes, right, and he has, of course, he has worked on it, that what to write on the board. So things are clear in his mind. Whenever he comes, so he knows he has done his job. Similarly, a good teacher, when he uses teaching aids, so he presents them well. Right? So, well presentation, good presentation, and of course, good preparation. What does this mean, presentation? That, of course, how to use board. If he writes on the corner, left corner, or the right corner, or if he uses the middle. Right? So, again, the font size of his writing. At times it happens, many a times, you might have seen, you might have experienced, that the teacher writes and the student at the back cannot see. So, the font size of your writing is a must. And you can ask, of course, at times you never know that, of course, the font size that you have developed may not be readable at the back of the class. So you can ask the students that on your part what you can do, that write with the maximum font size, that is what readable. And again, this should be, legible, visible, appropriate format for room and audience size. And this is all. Either you make a PowerPoint slide, either you make, in fact, charts, or you write on the board. So all these elements, they work. That legibility is important. Fine, visibility is important, and of course format. Then when you use, of course, teaching aids, they should be relevant. Right? Relevant to what? Pertinent to the topic. Clear? When you talk about pollution, so relevant aids can be used for the pollution. Up to date. Right? For example, nowadays, of course, now we have time for the multimedia, computer. Right? So, consistent with the local protocols. Again, you see that whatever the local system is, consistency with that. Right? If you don't have electricity and you have what you brought, computer there, so that would be useless, in fact. Right? So, therefore, these are some points that you must keep in mind when you have to use teaching aids. First, preparation, presentation, readability, and relevance. These are some points that you must work on. Is that clear, students? Alright. Now, what are the advantages of teaching aids and what are the disadvantages of teaching aids? You can have a look. There are some advantages. Cause more than one sense to be involved in the learning process. Definitely, when you use aid, in fact, a teaching aid, so it causes more than one sense to be involved. You see, sense of sight. Fine? And then, of course, maybe you feel that, of course. So, more than one sense is involved. Advantage. Allows for rapid presentation of material. Clear? Once you have the aid, you can quickly present those things. And third thing is, often results in more rapid initial understanding, promotes increased retention. Yes, when you have a visuals, retention is more, I told you earlier. And then what? Facilitates learning process for a variety of student learning styles. These are what? Advantages. Now, what are the disadvantages? No permanent record of what was written. Is that clear? You see, whatever you write on the teaching aids, of course, you can erase. For example, there is whiteboard. Right? This can be a disadvantage, that there is no permanent record. Instructors back to the audience. Sometimes you see when instructor writes on board, so his back turns to the audience. This may be a disadvantage. However, some instructors, they try their level best not to turn their back to the audience, but generally it happens. Right? And then limitation on portability and the audience side, of course. Definitely in the class size, sometimes you try hard, but still majority cannot see that message. Alright, so another disadvantage can be that some people may not have good handwriting, legible handwriting. So that again creates problem for the learners. And some people, if they are making slides, they cannot be good at computer skills. Some people cannot work on PowerPoint. So, or some people cannot work with that transparencies. Cannot talk while facing the board. For example, we're using board. When you are writing, you need to stop. So once you stop, there can be a problem in the class, right? So therefore, my dear students, when you are talking, when you are writing, being teacher, stop. This can be a disadvantage. Involve the students, in fact. Clear? That you see, when, in other words, when you are using teaching aids, in fact, right? So this can be another disadvantage. Have plenty of chalk markers and recap markers. This is what another disadvantage, that you need much chalk, right? You need, in fact, markers. So plenty of these things. These are some of the what? Maybe a resource problem. You may not have many markers, or if you are using chalk, that chalk can be, dangerous for your health. There is dust for the teacher and for the students. So therefore, these are what mean there are some advantages and disadvantages of teaching aids. Now examples are there. See, so what are we talking about? Chalkboard, whiteboard, flip chart. These are some examples. Then you have overhead projector, PowerPoint, data projector, smartboard, audio tapes, CDs, videotapes, DVDs, and podcast. These are what we call them teaching aids examples. Right? How many are these? Yes, in front of you. Very simple. First of all, we call chalkboard, we call it. Blackboard, you call it. Or you have what? Whiteboard these days. For chalkboard, we need chalk to write on. And blackboard, we need board markers. For whiteboards, we need markers, board markers we need. And then flip chart, of course. We can have a flip chart as a teaching aid. In training rooms, generally you see flip charts. Overhead projectors, OHP we call it. I'll show you the picture. PowerPoint, of course, MS software, application software, right? For making slides, you can use that. Data projectors, smartboard, of course, I might have talked about it earlier, that a computer attached smartboard. And then you have what? Audio tapes are there, CDs are there, videotapes are there, DVDs or podcast. These are examples of teaching aids. Now students, point is that what is chalkboard or the whiteboard? Very simple, right? You see in the picture that there is what? A whiteboard, and the teacher is doing maths, right? The teacher is using chalk on that blackboard. See, so construction, colored chalk and markers can enhance the presentation. If you have a blackboard, fine, so you can even improve the presentation by using multicolored chalks. There was a time we used to have only a white chalk and the board was black. But nowadays, of course, even in some schools, they have, of course, modified it. Fine, that with blackboard you can have, of course, different chalks. And in some schools, they have used the green board as well, and multicolored chalks can be used. So, using students as recorders can enhance involvement and free instructor's hand. Because once the teacher writes on the board and the students record that statement, fine, and the teacher erases on that what? Whiteboard. There is no permanent record of it, right? Student maintain record, and of course they are students, so how well they maintain record, it is questionable. Clear? And then proper use, how to use board, reliable, right? So dependable format. The point is that what is the proper use of the board? The first thing is that reliable. Unreliable, what does it mean? Dependable format, and should evoke consistent responses. right? So when you use board, fine, so use it for reliability. Clear? So how to use it? I mean, the format should be dependable, right? And the next thing is, should evoke consistent responses. And then what? Repetitions. Should support presentation, stress the important points, summarize and reinforce key. Because, I mean, on board, you can, when you underline a point, it means it is an important point. Or you increase the font size of a point, you see it's an important point. With chalk you can encircle, right? I mean, in language teaching, of course, if you have multicolored chalks, right, you can use them. So those multicolored chalks, in fact, what happens, that they improve what? Presentation, right? If you are using only one color chalk, you have only, I mean, white chalk available, so it would be difficult, but it doesn't mean that you cannot rely on that. You can request. But nowadays, of course, things, maybe in some public schools, in far-flung areas, you still use that blackboard, but in most of the cases, they have been replaced with the whiteboards, in fact. So, how to use blackboard? Again, that presentation, summarize the main points, stress the important points by highlighting. Okay, now in fact, look at here. Again, what are the advantages of chalkboard or whiteboard? Have a look, these are advantages of what we call them. And earlier we talked about, you see, advantages and disadvantages of teaching aids overall. But now in this slide, you will see there are some advantages and disadvantages of chalks. Very simple, right? You all know it. You can see it on the screen. So no advanced preparation required. This is one. That there is what, you see, no advanced preparation for the board, because board is available, right? You prepare on your paper, and of course if you are doing maths, so formulas are on there, so you can write it. Simply you have to erase it. Right? Erase the previous thing, and the board should be blackboard, in fact. Its color should not be white, right? If you are writing with the chalk, so that your text would be prominent. Except when displaying a complex table and talk, of course. Is that clear? If you have to, the point is that this board, as far as advantages are concerned, you see, when you have to draw some table, you can do that. It accepts, in fact. Well, students, so we are talking about advantages of this chalkboard. So first advantage is that, you see, no advanced preparation is required, except when you have to, in fact, display a complex table, chart or diagram. Fine. Second advantage is that technology is not dependent on electricity. A board doesn't need electricity. Board does need light. So can be used for students' problem solving, in fact, right? So it is what? A cheapest source, right? And it doesn't need electricity, it needs light, fine. And initially maybe teachers find hard to write on it, but with practice they can overcome this problem. Now coming to disadvantages. Time consuming if you have a lot to write. Again, because I mean, when you write with chalk on the board, it's difficult. It consumes time, right? If you compare it with the marker on the whiteboard, so that is faster. That saves your time. Handwriting may be difficult to read. Yes, again, legibility, size, glare, etc. Turn your back on audience. Again, like I told you earlier, that when you write on the board, you have to. As compared to a whiteboard marker, the chalkboard requires more attention, more focus and more energies. So ultimately, the teachers have to turn back, right? And their back, in fact, student face the back of the teacher. Cleaning the board, yes, chalk, dust, all these things are there. That you can erase the board, but that chalk dust can create a problem. Can't go back to something you have erased. Again, you know that once you have erased something, you cannot undo it. Like in smart board, you can go back. Like in computer, when you type something, you can undo, Control Z. Clear? But here, once something is erased, it has gone. It has gone, right? If you need it again, you have to rewrite it. So these are some of the disadvantages of chalkboard. Now, flip chart. Now there's a flip chart there, in fact. In schools, colleges, universities, flip charts are rare. But in some institutions you might find it. But in training rooms and training halls, you will find flip chart is important part, right? It's a teaching aid, in fact a training aid we call it. So flip chart is there, you can flip it, right? See here, when to use flip chart and tips for using flip chart, in fact. Now, when to use flip chart? If electricity is unavailable, right, generally of course we are going through the energy crisis in our country. So if you are a language teacher and if you have available flip chart, use it, right? To enable students to illustrate group reports. Is that clear? So when there is a group project, so flip chart can be used. To provide written record of points made by the students. Because one, there is a flip chart and you can flip it, right? So there are 5 flip charts are there. So there are 5 groups. So points of 4-5 groups can be given, can be written on that flip chart, and that can be flipped. And it can help you in your future reference as well. Tips for using flip chart, very simple. Check the room and equipment beforehand. Check that. Does the flip has charts? Fine. And then of course the markers available. Get your pad of newsprint. Write out important pages in advance. Don't put too much on a page. Carry a collection of felt tip pens and check that they haven't dried out. Because when you write on the flip charts, you need what? Pen, right? To write on the board, or even you can use permanent markers, of course, on these flip charts, right? And then you need to know what to write on that. That is, get your own pad of newsprint. Write out important pages in advance and don't put too much on a page. This is important. The flip chart should be uncluttered, right? Don't put much on it. Clear? Because when you write much on the flip chart, so it creates problem for the students, right? So put it at a place where maximum could see it, if it is for all, right? So these are some tips to use flip charts. Here is what construction that commercially available, needs a stand, can make your own, right? You can make your own flip charts, very easy, right? So just need a stand and you can have a flip chart. Generally these days what we have seen, that where there is a stand and there is a whiteboard on the stand, on that whiteboard you attach this flip, and that has a flip, has some charts, so you can move these things. And proper use of this flip chart, complicated or time consuming, in fact. Fine, illustration should be done ahead of time. Clear? One thing. Second, do not walk with back to audience. Again, when you have a flip chart, like see the trainer is doing it, the teacher. So when you turn your back to the flip chart, audience cannot see it. Students cannot see it, right? Writing again should be legible. This is a must, my dear students. Being TEFL teachers, being of course student of this course, try to have a good handwriting, right? And this is a must, because handwriting, I mean the point is that how to have it, how to make it legible. Some teachers have naturally poor handwriting, so they can work on it. It doesn't mean that you need to be have calligraphic skills, but what you can do is you can make it legible, you can make it readable, and with every writing you can ask yourself that you need improvement on it, right? Involve students. Once you are using this flip chart, try to involve. When you are writing on the board, so ask students, please have a look this picture. so they would be involved. If illustrations are pre-drawn, staple 2 pages together, so cannot show through in fact, right? And then write notes to self in pencil at edge, audience cannot see. But you have to, for example, for yourself, if you have to use flip chart, of course in the class, and if you have planned it, you can write small points with lead pencils on the corner, right? So that audience could not see, and that would be a sport for you. There are some advantages of these flip charts and there are disadvantages. Very simple. They are inexpensive, advantage, reasonably portable, you can move them. A board cannot be moved. Portability of a whiteboard is difficult as compared to a flip chart. Can be saved? Yes, you can save that flip chart. Dependable, of course, you can depend on it. Encourage spontaneity, change, right? Room lights, of course, left on. Flip charts can be used, of course, mean lights on. Disadvantage, limited writing space. Very natural. I'll show you flip chart. As compared to a whiteboard, as compared to a blackboard, space is limited. Changes are messy, right? And instructors back to audience as usual. Limitations on size of room and audience. So these are what there are some disadvantages of what? Flip charts. Now students, overhead projectors and transparencies. OHP. Can you see it? Yes. Overhead projectors. Have a look, proper use. So this is what we call it OHP. How to use OHP, right? What is the proper use of OHP? Well students, the point is that of course if you have to discuss complicated details, for example some grammatical structures, so there can be some complications if you are teaching. So in that case, prepare those in advance. For example, you will have your micro teaching. So if you are using OHPs, so prepare those things in advance, right? By hand, computer printing, printer or photocopier can be used. You can get your data copied on transparency, or you can write with hand on transparency. It's a thin sheet that you put on the OHP and its image is magnified. Arrange in order. Use something to keep in order. Number them in fact. You can number these transparencies. If you have 5-6 transparencies, they should be in order so that audience would not be confused. Cover unwanted portion until ready for the audience to use. Sometimes you have a slide, you have a transparency, and there are 4 points on the transparency, but you are talking about first 2 points. In this case, the better you hide the remaining 2 points. I hope you understand. Supposing you have 4 points you have put on a transparency, so okay, no problem. But now at the moment you are talking about the first 2 points. Right? So you are talking about the first 2 points, so it's better if you hide the remaining 2 points. One thing. Second thing is in fact leave on long enough for audience to read, take notes, etc. Highlight point, it's important, involve students. Because when you use these teaching aids, audience involvement can be a problem, so try to involve them. Right? By engaging them in a talk or by showing something on the transparency so that they would take interest in these OHP. This is what simple construction of OHP. You can transparencies, you can have a look, focus, projector, make sure font size is large enough to be readable. This is very important. Sometimes it happens, my dear students, that you see you write on that transparency and font is very small, and you know it once you start teaching. So therefore you need to know the room where you are teaching, you need to know the strength and accordingly set the font size, right? And use non-permanent pens for spontaneous addition. Is that clear? Non-permanent, not permanent, because that is non-permanent and you can do it. Highlight permanent parts with different colors. Clear? Create, of course, on computer, fine, it's easy, good. Use clip art or other graphics, it's important. Run through copy machine to put on transparency. Set machines at right length, do not use, of course. These are all draw as you go for best effect. Turn off if it is not using. These are what we call them flip charts. So things are very easy. You can easily, read these slides and know it, that make good transparencies. Fine, put them in a proper place. Clear? And if something is not in use, cover it. Clear? And do not, fill those transparencies with much text. This is what is important. Again, there are some advantages and disadvantages. You can have a look. Of course, that transparencies, attention getting. Fine, there was a time that computer was not there, so OHP was in, and it was, considered as a luxury. Right, it was better than the other teaching aids, right? Relatively inexpensive, yes, if you compare it with the computer, it's inexpensive, easy to prepare, it's very simple, transparencies are available in market, you can buy them, you see, they are not very expensive, and you can write with hand or you can get things copied on that. Instructor can face audience, yes, you can do that, it's very easy, because OHP is generally placed on the side and you can have the look. Reasonably portable, you can easily, student can take it, of course, no problem. Can sometime leave room lights on, of course, sometime with lights on you can do, and sometime with lights off. Fairly reliable machinery, it's reliable. Can write on while talking, yes, you can do that, you can write on the transparency easily. Disadvantages, require equipment, that projector is required. Must know how to use equipment, it's very important. You have to make adjustments, certain adjustment, and these are very easy adjustment, my dear students. You can do them on your own. Fine, size of the room, alright, and strength can be a limitation, can be building to instructor, alright, and can be noisy at times, right, and can drop a group of transparencies out of order. These are some of the disadvantages if transparencies are not in order. If you forget to number your transparency, so it would be difficult for you. Is that clear? That's why I told you that, well, when you make transparencies, do number them and put them in proper order. If you see, so there are some more advantages and disadvantages of overhead projector transparencies. Advantages are there, allow you to prepare all your slides in advance. You do it, particularly suited for complex diagrams. This OHP can build up information point by point. Don't have to turn your back on the audience because it is on the side. Again, there are some disadvantages. Fine, a blown bulb or a power failure can spoil all your hard work. Fine, if the power goes or the OHP stops functioning, so you would be in trouble. Image quality can also be problem. Yes, sometimes it looks vague, it's not clear, right? It can be a problem. Can be disorienting to manipulate transparencies on projector plate. Sometimes they disorientate, right? So these are, my dear students, some of the advantages and disadvantages of OHP transparencies. Well, students, so these are what we call are some advantages and disadvantages of what OHP projector is there, how to make transparencies and how to use transparencies, and above all, what are the positives and what are the negatives of these transparencies. And transparencies is easy to do. In fact, you can get these thin sheets easily, they are easily available in the market, and you can write on these transparencies, and even you can write during your teaching. when you teach language, so the transparency is in front of you, so immediately you can do that. Like in computers, if you have a PowerPoint slide in front of you, so you can do that. Like I am teaching right now, whenever I find any problem in the slide, so I see that and I can undo it, I can redo it, right? So is the case in transparency. You can write with your red pen, or of course a marker, and that can be placed on that projector. The point is, the disadvantages are there, that again it depends on power. If there is a power failure, so it cannot work, right? And similarly, it can disorient the students, and sometimes the image creates a problem, and sometimes it happens that you see adjustment can be a problem. So these are some of the what we call them disadvantages of this OHP. So let's come to the summary of this lecture 14. That is, in this lecture we talked about what? How to choose the most appropriate visual aid for your purpose and context, right? Again, in the beginning I told you that why to use these visual aids, and I told you that these visuals in fact improve understanding of the learners. These visuals help the teacher to in fact to convey the message with the help of these teaching aids. And again we started with the oldest technology, the blackboard, or nowadays we have whiteboard, and we saw what are the advantages and disadvantages of using blackboard or the whiteboard in the class. And somehow the problem that we faced in the blackboard, this whiteboard has improved it. But again, in some schools, of course, in the areas where whiteboard is not available, the blackboard is still in. So you have to teach whatever the resources are available. You can ask for the better resources, but a good language teacher is the one who does not make the resource as a problem. So he tries for the good resources, but he starts with the available resources. So we talked about this chalkboard or the blackboard, and of course we see once you compare the chalkboard with the whiteboard. So you will find whiteboard that it is easy to use. Both have a problem. You cannot transport them easily. Fine. But the point is that the writing speed on whiteboard is more than the blackboard. And of course we talk about OHP transparencies, or how to use projector, and we also talked about flip charts, right? What are the good points of flip charts and what are the bad points of flip charts, and how can we construct a flip chart, and how can we use flip chart. So with this, it's time to say goodbye. We'll continue this teaching aids in our coming lecture. That would be lecture number 15. Thank you very much. See you in the next class.